Trump may have just made the greatest mistake of the entire trade war, a misstep so enormous that China not only foresaw it, but also prepared for it long before he acted. While Trump storms across the global stage issuing threats in every direction, Beijing observes calmly, calculating every move with precision, letting America stumble into its own traps. Meanwhile, America's closest allies, Canada, Europe, and Japan, are not only frustrated, they are furious. The G7, once a symbol of Western unity, is fracturing in real time, and Trump's tactics, if they can be called that, are collapsing under their own contradictions. Not long ago, Trump boasted that Chinese imports would be hit with duties as high as 55%, touting it as proof of his dominance on Beijing. But when the two sides were scheduled to finalize an agreement, China abruptly pulled back. Insiders revealed that Beijing doesn't even view Washington's threats as credible. America's response? Instead of escalating, Washington quietly delayed the negotiations and postponed the tariffs, an unspoken admission that the U.S. cannot win this battle without China. But rather than reassess, Trump redirected his anger toward America's partners. Canada was struck with a 35% tariff, Switzerland faced 39%, and Taiwan, America's most important chip supplier, was targeted with 20%. Competitors are spared while allies are punished. This isn't strategy, it's disorder. The damage is unmistakable. Trump is destabilizing trade, inflating costs, squeezing U.S. businesses, and alienating the very nations that once stood firmly beside America. Meanwhile, China says nothing. No fiery rhetoric. No dramatic gestures. Just patience, allowing Trump to weaken his own position. Inflation rises, jobs are at risk, supply chains falter, and the G7 fragments. The question is unavoidable. Who is actually controlling the game now? Within days, Trump's team unraveled the fragile framework of international trade that took decades to construct, all while pretending it was part of a master plan. Tariffs are back, but instead of damaging adversaries, they are hitting allies the hardest. Europe faces a 15% duty under the pretext of resetting trade, but EU leaders know there is nothing fair about it, and they are enraged. Canada suffers a crushing 35% tariff with no dialogue, no compromise, no explanation. Washington insists Canadian products are being smuggled into the US, but no serious observer accepts that. It isn't reform. It's pressure disguised as policy. Trump isn't safeguarding US workers, he's coercing allies into obedience, turning economics into a weapon of dominance. While Trump lashes out unpredictably, China plays an entirely different game. Patient, disciplined, and deliberate. Canada pleads for exemptions like Europe, but Beijing calmly negotiates a 90-day tariff delay and succeeds. That single move highlights Washington's weakness and Beijing's leverage. The reality is that the US doesn't just depend on China for cheap goods. China is the backbone of America's consumer economy. In 2024, over 16% of US imports originated in China. Everything from smartphones and clothing to medicines and household essentials. Even in the middle of a trade war, the flow is enormous. If Chinese imports stopped tomorrow, shelves in American stores would be empty within weeks. Walmart itself acknowledges that nearly 60% of its stock comes directly from China. The White House understands this truth. Any rupture with Beijing would devastate America's economy far worse than a military conflict ever could. And China's leverage extends beyond consumer products. Its sharpest edge lies in rare earth elements, the indispensable materials used in electric cars, fighter jets, advanced medical equipment, and smartphones. Beijing controls nearly 70% of global output and has already hinted that US access could be restricted. The last time China limited rare earth exports, in 2010 against Japan, Tokyo's tech sector nearly collapsed. If Beijing repeats that move on America, the result won't simply be economic discomfort, it will be an economic blackout. But Beijing's most subtle yet devastating weapon lies in finance. In 2024, China sold off more than $100 billion worth of US Treasury bonds, striking Washington and Wall Street at their weakest point. America lives on debt. Government spending, corporate borrowing, mortgages, student loans, all hinge on smooth bond markets. When a powerhouse like China pulls back, interest rates surge, borrowing costs rise, and the impact ripples across the economy. Businesses face tighter credit, households pay more for housing, industries stall, and investors panic. These aren't just numbers on a screen, they're deliberate signals. Beijing doesn't need threats. It communicates through calculated financial action. For decades, Washington assumed the dominance of the dollar was unshakable, the stability of U.S. markets unquestionable. That belief is collapsing. In June 2025, Beijing escalated by unloading treasuries on a colossal scale. Bond yields spiked, investors panicked, and the Federal Reserve was forced into an emergency intervention, pumping liquidity to contain the shock. The price was steep, liquidity drained from other sectors, markets froze, and the Dow Jones plunged more than 600 points in a single day. The trade war has now mutated into a financial confrontation. And here China doesn't need to raise its voice. Its actions alone can destabilize Wall Street and rattle the entire system. Yet finance is just one battlefield. The geopolitical order itself is splintering. Look at India. For years, New Delhi balanced carefully, seeking U.S. markets, advanced military technology, and closer ties to the West, all while avoiding direct clashes with Washington. That restraint has disappeared. In 2025, India is louder, more independent, more defiant than ever. Despite unrelenting American pressure, India continues to import vast amounts of discounted Russian oil. The numbers are staggering. Before the Ukraine conflict, only 2% of India's oil came from Russia. Today it exceeds 34%. This isn't a minor adjustment, it's a total redrawing of India's energy landscape. Washington threatens sanctions, reduced defense cooperation, even cutting off military technology transfers. But India refuses to yield. Its calculation is ruthless and pragmatic. National energy security outweighs American approval. And that defiance carries a message. The world no longer spins around Washington's demands. Inexpensive Russian crude fuels India's factories, fills its vehicles, and keeps prices under control. For New Delhi to surrender to Washington's pressure would mean harming its own economy while gaining nothing concrete in exchange. Whether India maintains this stance over the long haul is still uncertain, but the mere fact that it resists at all reveals something significant. The old order where the United States dictated and others followed is collapsing. If India's refusal signals a shift, China's stance is even bolder. Beijing has moved beyond quiet resistance into open defiance. China continues trading with Russia and Iran in full view of the world, brushing aside American restrictions as if they were irrelevant. In just the first half of 2025, China's purchases from Russia soared, mainly in oil and gas. At the same time, Beijing is leading a quiet revolution in global finance, gradually substituting the dollar with Taiwan in cross-border exchanges. Contract by contract, country by country, the dollar's dominance is weakening. Chinese ships still unload in Iranian ports. Chinese firms still sign billion-dollar agreements with sanctioned partners. All of this continues despite the looming threat of secondary penalties. Washington calls for unity, but while it talks, Beijing constructs an alternative framework, a system of commerce, banking, and diplomacy where U.S. leverage loses meaning. The irony is sharp. The harder Trump pushes, the more America isolates itself. What was meant to corner Beijing is instead estranging Washington's allies. Europe grows uneasy, not only due to tariffs but also because of the arrogance with which the U.S. dictates terms. Canada, long a neighbor and partner, is reeling under severe 35% duties. Its lumber sector bleeds jobs, its dairy farms collapse, its car makers struggle. Canadian exports to the U.S. have plunged, and this decline isn't short-lived. While Canada suffers, China rises. Beijing seizes the opportunities Washington creates, inking fresh agreements, locking in energy partnerships, and extending influence across Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. One by one, developing nations see Beijing as the preferred partner, while the U.S. appears unreliable. This leads to the key question: will Washington recognize the trap it has walked into, or will it persist in burning bridges and strengthening the rivals it aims to weaken? Trump's approach breeds division rather than unity. The G7, once a symbol of Western cooperation, now looks like a group scrambling to dodge American punishment. The tariffs tell the story. Canada 35%, Thailand 19%, Taiwan 20%, Switzerland an astonishing 39%. There is no real strategy, only a blunt message: loyalty counts for nothing, pay or suffer. Allies are forced to pay twice, first by buying U.S. debt through government bonds, and then again when their industries are smashed by tariffs. Even efforts to shield Washington from fallout bring harsher punishment. The cycle fosters resentment and speeds up fragmentation. Meanwhile, BRICS is quietly stepping into the vacuum, offering stability, scale, predictability, and fairness, qualities Washington no longer guarantees. Countries wounded by U.S. policies are flocking to BRICS. Agreements are being signed, infrastructure financed, commerce expanded. What once would have taken decades is unfolding within years. India, China, Brazil, Indonesia, these are becoming the new hubs of global exchange. Instead of weakening Beijing, Trump's strategy has empowered it. Global trade is not collapsing, it is rerouting, reorganizing, and rebuilding around China. Inside America, dysfunction is even clearer. Trump's customs system is described by exporters as a bureaucratic nightmare, like interpreting a tax code drafted in panic. A single mistake, sending goods through the wrong port or filing under the wrong code, can trigger devastating 40% fines. Rules change abruptly, exceptions appear then vanish, and the system is inconsistent and opaque. Companies aren't leaving by choice, they're leaving because survival is impossible. No multinational can plan investments when rules shift overnight and enforcement is arbitrary. On the surface, the U.S. still looks powerful, its army unmatched, its economy vast, its influence global. But beneath the numbers, the truth is plain. Trust is vanishing. Allies are drifting away. America is becoming a partner others cannot depend on. If this continues, the U.S. won't lose leadership because it was defeated. It will lose because it isolated itself, undermining its own position with every new tariff, sanction, and threat. And this isn't speculation, it's unfolding right now. The decisive question is whether Washington will recognize the danger before it's irreversible. Will it step back, rethink, and rebuild alliances? Or will it double down, battling rivals it cannot defeat while alienating friends? The outcome is not written yet, but the world is shifting quickly, dramatically. The order built after World War II is eroding, and a new structure is emerging. What began as resistance has become a global transformation. The story has only just begun.